you still seeking a one-week delay in order to testify?
On the advice of my counsel, I respectfully exercise my Fifth Amendment right and decline to answer that question.
Ladies and gentlemen, seeking the truth is the obligation of this committee. I can see no point in going further. I have no expectation that Ms. Lerner will cooperate with this committee, and therefore we stand adjourned.
Chairman, I have a statement. I have a procedural question, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I have a procedural question. Mr. Chairman, you cannot run a committee like this. You just cannot do this. We're better than that as a country. We're better than that as a committee. I have asked for a few minutes to ask a procedural. What's the big deal? May I ask my question? May I state my statement?
You're all free to leave. We've adjourned, but the gentleman may ask his question.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, I have one procedural question, and it goes to trying to help you get the information, by the way, that you just asked.
What is your question?
Let me say what I have to say. I've listened to you for the last 15 or 20 minutes. Let me say what I have to say. Chairman, I have one procedural question.
Ms. Lerner, you're released. You may.
But first, I would like to use my time to make some brief points. For the past year, the central Republican accusation in this investigation.
We're adjourned. Close it down.
Political collusion directed by.
On the left-hand side of your screen, let me just tell our viewers what you're seeing there. Darrell Issa is standing, and he says, "We're adjourned." And Elijah Cummings, who's the ranking Democrat, says, "No, we're not."
Of the United States of America. I am tired of this. Well, we have members over here, each who represent 700,000 people. You cannot just have a one-sided investigation. There is absolutely something wrong with that, and it is absolutely un-American.
Hear, hear.
We had a hearing. Adjourned.
I gave you an opportunity to ask a question. You had no question. I do have a question.
I gave you an opportunity to speak.
Chairman, what are you hiding?
He's taking the fifth, Elijah.
He continues to sing on Sunday when he has
All right. You're not getting clear audio because it would appear as though Darrell Issa, the chairman of the committee, shut off the audio. So what you're getting is sort of ambient sound from the cameras in the room. It's very hard to understand what Elijah Cummings is saying, but clearly he is quite upset about what has unfolded here. Again, you're just now joining us. Lois Lerner appeared for the second time before the House Oversight Committee, and in response to questions from the chairman, invoked her Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination.
Welcome to the Citizens Reporter. I'm the host and editor, Diana Longry. Thank you for tuning in. The clip that we were just watching is from our U.S. House of Representatives when they were doing some of their hearings with regard to the recent events of what the IRS has been doing with certain nonprofits. And apparently it looks like some of the House members, particularly the chair of the committee, didn't want to hear what some of the other members of the committee had to say. And so, well, you saw that they were going through shutting down the mics. Now, this is happening in Washington, D.C. It also happens here. It also happens here at the local level. And here at the Citizens Reporter, we have shown numerous incidents where citizens, not elected officials, but citizens, had the microphone turned off on them. Now, I want to welcome you to our program of the Citizens Reporter. We have a lot of news. We also have a lot of video on some local recent events going on in our metropolitan area here. And with me tonight is Mr. Mark Bradley, who is a regular Citizens Reporter to help with this evening's news. So with that, I want to welcome you, Mr. Bradley, and I'm going to lob the ball over to you so you can get started with the news.
If you would like to call in on any issue that we happen to present, please feel free to, but also call your legislators and call the individuals who are related to this. And the first article I would like to talk about is one that I kind of feel is outrageous in its veracity. And for people who don't understand what that word means, it means that somebody's taking their ego to a new extent. In this case, the Super Bowl bid. And what gets me about is when we built a new stadium for our football teams and our college teams and all these other things, and our baseball teams, that we stand second fiddle. I think it's outrageous that these national teams can give us the bird. And I think our governor should answer why it is that these responsible people are not being asked to stand up like they should. It's $1 billion that's being spent over in Minneapolis. I call it the welfare city, corporate welfare, as it were. And I want to make that point, that all that money went to one city to develop this special stadium that's so much larger than anything that's going to be built in any of the other cities that are even comparable to our city in size.
Well, when you mentioned about being given the bird,
Yep.
Perhaps it's the state bird, the loon.
Well, that's what it sounds like. They figure that we're too loony to care. And that's too sad to think about. But at the same time, let's not throw all the rocks at what's going on. One of the issues that is out there that's a very considered issue that has to be discussed is that they are now looking at connecting up a water connection down in the southwest corner of Minnesota where they don't have a lot of water. So they're actually funneling water into that area, and it's under a special in Worthington. They're looking at spending $1 billion to connect up the area for water because they do not have the same ability to have water usage as the rest of the state.
And, you know, there's always seems to be a lot of discussion with our public officials with regard to water when it's convenient. And the reason I say this is because, you know, we have up here, we have local elected officials who, rightly so, are concerned about the water levels in White Bear Lake. However, oftentimes it's those same elected officials at the legislature that when it comes to talking about protecting our groundwater, that there's not a lot of discussion about protecting our groundwater. Or when you're looking at it at the national level, what about protecting our groundwater when we're talking about the impact that fracking has upon the groundwater of many states that are undergoing the assault of those who support fracking? And while it's important to talk about how we are going to properly manage our water, it seems to me oftentimes the elected officials only do it when it's convenient and perhaps when it's going to mean votes for them, or that if there's a special lobbyist group, such as the fracking group, that doesn't want to talk about groundwater protection, well, you know, then you follow the money. So I think it's a valid discussion to be talking about water management, but it's important for citizens to realize that it's not always the top of the list when it comes to politicians.
Right, and you've got to realize that when we're looking at what's going on, and I do have a lot to do with this oil that's we're discussing at this point, being pumped out of South Dakota in that area, and there's a lot of big issues, but I was going to touch those. Because
last week you brought up the fact that when they're doing their oil production in South Dakota, that a lot of that natural gas is just being burned off.
Right, and it's sad because of what we're really talking about, and this was in, actually, if you want to find it, it was in the Tuesday, April 8th newspaper. They talked about per day, it's about 1.4 million gallons that are being burnt off.
And I want our viewers to, again, hear that number. How many gallons?
1.4 million gallons per day.
Per day. And remember how this past winter, folks who live in rural areas were having a shortage of natural gas for their propane tanks to heat their homes. And now you did find some information on what that cost is per gallon.
Well, we were talking about that, one of my friends had told me that it's about $4 per gallon on natural gas at this point.
And so think about that amount of gas that is just being burned off, that is going to no good use, and then at the other end, then we've got people who are experiencing a shortage because they can't get it.
So that would be about $5.6 million in gas per day, or close to $2 billion per year.
Wow, that's amazing.
And at the same time, here's CenterPoint Gas looking to increase the rates here. Now, what really bothers me about this is it all is predicated on a whole bunch of fallacies and lies that the public should be very angry about, and one of them is that we have to ship all that oil. Well, let's understand, because we're taking so much oil out of the ground right now, if you remember, I talked about what it was doing to the farmers who can't ship their grains and things like that.
Right, because of the priority with the railroad companies,
right,
that there's a higher priority for them to ship the oil than there is the grain.
So it actually is going to increase the price of all grain products this year, and it's going to cost you a lot more on everything else. But at the same time, you've got to realize they're just throwing that away, and you got to realize this was Earth Day was this week, and actually it's Ecology Week. A lot of people also call it Ecology Week, and we're not really taking any consideration on it. Like I said, when you're talking about that much being thrown into the ozone and being burnt, don't tell me that we can do anything with putting anything on the cows or anything else that's going to affect us to the great degree of all that burnt gas that's going up in the stratosphere.
Now, I understand we have a caller on the phone, so let's take our caller.
Right.
You invited them to call in, and we are glad they were listening. So, caller, thank you. Comments for us this evening, or perhaps a question?
Hi, Diana. Hi, Mark.
Hello.
First of all, it's North Dakota, not South
Oh,
Dakota.
okay,
Well, North
sorry.
Dakota, right.
North Dakota, thank you very much.
Second of all, Diana, I got a question about the original legislature meeting that you had there. Is there not any type of parliamentary procedure where you're giving equal time to equal side, no matter how they use it? That's my question. Good
question. And this is my understanding of it, is that the chair presides over the proceeding. And in this particular hearing, the individual from the IRS that they had there to testify, she kept pleading the Fifth. And because she was doing that, the chair decided that he was just going to shut down the meeting and not let the other representatives have their opportunity to give their comments, or perhaps they may have had other questions, maybe that she may not have pled the Fifth on. He just basically decided, from my understanding, to shut down the hearing. And the process that I observe when I'm watching these hearings is that part of what each representative gets to do, they get to use part of their time to give their statement as to their position. And certainly that has nothing to do with whether or not the people that you've called in to testify, if they are being cooperative or not, that the representatives still have that opportunity of being able to say what their point of view is, and they do spend quite a bit of time on giving what their viewpoint is. And then they have that opportunity within time frames of asking questions. And like I say, it's very possible that perhaps the representative would have had other questions that may not have resulted in the IRS representative of pleading the Fifth. And so it does seem rather cavalier of the chair to have suddenly just decided that because the representative from the IRS was pleading the fifth with regard to his questions, that he just shut it down. It seems sort of, well, you know, I'm not getting my way, so I'm just going to close it all down and go home. So I hope that helps to answer your question.
But I have to ask one question myself,
Yes.
Diane. Did he actually follow parliamentary procedure? Wasn't he supposed to take a full vote that the whole committee should vote before they shut any situation like that down?
You know, I think it depends on where the hearing is at and what point of the process they're in, whether or not, if there's any need for a vote. Because oftentimes, I have observed that a chair says, okay, we've come to the conclusion of this hearing, I hereby call it adjourned, and that the chair has that prerogative. But again, with the fact that the chair has that prerogative, the chair also has to be cognitive of not being, you know, heavy-handed in how they execute their prerogative that they have, because there is a certain reason why people want to be in power in these various hearings is because they do have more prerogative than maybe somebody else who's lower on the pecking order.
But didn't also this gentleman that was speaking get recognized by the chair in advance, and then he tried to pull out before he'd actually made any statement?
Well, you know, that's a great observation you made, because it was like at first he wasn't quite recognized, then the chair started to second guess what he had done, and so then he was going to recognize him and say, okay, go ahead, you know, because keep in mind there are opposite parties from each other. So he did recognize him and say, okay, you can go ahead and say what your comments are. But then, when the chair heard that the comments were actually going in a different direction than what the chair wanted to allow, then that's when he totally shut him down, and then the mics were turned off. And so that you do see that interplay in between there, where that chair was at first going to shut it down, then he was going to let him talk, and then when he heard what the content of that speech was going to be, then he shut it down again. Now, I understand that we have sparked another caller on the line, so I want to welcome you. Questions or comments?
More of a comment, more of an observation. I find it interesting that Representative Darrell Issa, a Republican from California, is basically using heavy-handed tactics when it comes to the Democrats. But when the Republicans were in the minority a number of years ago, or even when the Republicans were in the minority prior to the '94 election, Democrats were using those same heavy-handed tactics, and the Republicans deplored such a move, that they demanded that they be heard and so forth. So I find it rather ironic that Darrell Issa and the Republicans are now more than willing to use the tactics that they deplored when they were in the minority.
You know, and you see that so often in politics, is that the one that's in the minority cries foul, but they do everything in their power to get back in power, and then once they are in power, they use exactly the same things, like you say, that they called deplorable when they were in the minority. And it does seem rather hypocritical, and yet you see that not only at the national level, but you see it at the local level as well. It's sort of like the local people think, the local politicians think, well, because they can do it at the national level, they can too, and yet really, they should rise above it, and just because they do it at the national level, you shouldn't say, well, then I think I'm just going to do it too. Why?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
One other point I was going to make is it was actually done just most recently in Maplewood. Councilmember Bob Cardinal wanted city staff to do a survey on the trash haulers, how many of the trash haulers that were out there, how many of them lost business, and how much business was lost due to going to organized trash collection. Now, I remember when Will Rosbach was in the minority, along with Kathy Juneman, they put demands on staff. When you were mayor, they put demands on staff that certain things be done because they wanted the public to know what's going on. Now, suddenly that they're in charge, they all of a sudden don't want the public to kind of follow or understand what's going on. So you even see it, you're seeing it at the local level as well.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And that's why with a program like this with Citizens Reporter, you know, we try to have a little smattering of information on different levels of government so that after a while you start to see that there really are some trends in how either government seems to follow certain policies and procedures which really do eliminate the citizen's voice, or that it is specifically designed to promote those who are in power. And again, it doesn't necessarily matter what level of government you are at. You will see that there are common threads of how those who are in power, how they structure things to either ensure that their voice is loudest or that they make sure that nobody else's voice is ever heard.
Right.
Yes.
One thing in closing, and I'll
Yes.
let you guys get
Go
back,
ahead.
because when Mr. Bradley talks about corporate welfare, watch the Republican Party. Right now, they're for the people if they follow the Constitution. But if they ever get control of all three branches of the government again, the little people will be silenced. So that's just kind of my prediction based on the way things
You're right.
Hey,
Yep, yep.
have a great evening.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And along those lines of what the caller was mentioning, I think certainly here we have talked on this program oftentimes about tax increment financing, and tax increment financing isn't necessarily always bad, but you need to go through an analysis to determine whether or not, because I view tax increment financing as a type of corporate welfare. It does pick winners and losers between corporations, the big guy, the little guy, whoever it is that is getting that subsidy by way of tax increment financing, and it does seem
And
like
it
it
can
doesn't
even work in a private level
Yeah.
because of we discussed that in the past. So
well, and it doesn't really matter whether or
Right.
not if you've got Democrats in office or you've got Republicans in office, that if they have the ear of the corporate engines that want tax increment financing, you know, they're running to the tune of those corporations, not to the tune of thinking about long-term consequences or whether or not if it is really the best tool to use in a community.
And sometimes you have to ask, is your city really that concerned with its own public? Because the fact is, many times we see that they are counterintuitive. In fact, I would like to take this point because of this week in the Lilly newspaper, they were talking about that Maplewood is starting construction on its new fire station. Now, I agree that there should be a fire station down on the 3M site, but I find it ironic that Maplewood is either so incompetent or so stupid that they can't figure out which side of the road that Maplewood is on. It's like which side of the chicken crossed over. I mean, it's so ridiculous.
Well, and at a recent Maplewood meeting, Maplewood's mayor, who lives in South Maplewood, who basically stood by as they eliminated Precinct 16. By the way, all of you who live in South Maplewood, you no longer will have a Precinct 16. It's been eliminated, and you have now been merged with Precinct 15. And the mayor who lives down in South Maplewood, she just basically stood by and said, well, I guess it has to happen. She didn't ask for them to give a justification. She didn't fight for Precinct 16 to remain as an as a distinct precinct. There actually could be a couple of other precincts that could have been combined. You know, like Precinct 14 is a pretty slim precinct when you're looking at the population that is within Precinct 14. And so if you needed to combine a couple precincts, perhaps Precinct 14 would have been a better choice because Precinct 16 is a fairly large precinct, and now they've merged it with another fairly large precinct, Precinct 15. But she sat by, and at that same meeting, she said, "Oh, and we just came from that where they did the shovel, where they cut the ribbon type of thing, and that they, you know, throw that first shovel of dirt." Well, then she says, "Well, and but you know, when we're going to be giving South Maplewood a new fire station," and I'm thinking, except that, you know, it is north of 94.
Right.
And she lives way down on Snowshoe Lane, which is way down by Carver. And I'm thinking, boy, does she realize what a distance it is between where she lives and north of 94? I don't know. Perhaps she might want to time it one day.
Well, like I tried to point out for the last 2 years, there's an area that Oakdale has been asking Maplewood to take a look at for development, and it's
by Tanner's Lake.
By Tanner's Lake,
yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And we got to understand that when we're talking about Maplewood and where the people live, there isn't anybody that lives in the Battle Creek Park.
That's right.
And that
is not a population center. That's correct.
So what you have is you've got no houses, nothing there that needs to be protected from fires on the McKnight side of it, because they've got a fire station for St. Paul that's just on the other side of the highway there, in the Sunray area.
Well, and you know, and one of the things that you and I have talked about before is about sometimes the ideas that they talk about in some of these meetings is inconsistent with practical reality and what is true in most of all of our lives, the regular folks. And we have a clip here of something that was at a recent council meeting where they had a presentation from the Urban Land Institute where they were talking about new trends and how maybe they apply to Maplewood. And so I'm going to ask our control room to play this, because it goes right to that issue of what people talk about from the books they read. Does it really translate to our real development in our real communities with our real life? And this has to do with our young folks today and how they feel about having vehicles. Okay?
Meet all of their daily needs within a walk of their home.
Okay.
I'm not hearing anything right now.
Well, you know what? Of course, you know, part of this, too,
are by choice not getting their driver's license. No, not that they're not even driving. Not that they're not driving. They're just not even getting their license. My stepbrother is a great example of this. He and all of his friends who are in that generation, I don't think any of them has their license, which just... Being a Gen Xer, I was like, what? That was, you know, you turn 16, you get your license the day that you turn 16. I just couldn't believe it. But they said, well, why do I need that? It just costs me more money. You know, I don't have that money. I'd rather live in a great place near my friends. And I think that's another thing that Maplewood can be thinking about in terms of how you attract that generation, is that the Gen Y generation doesn't look at their home just as a place to live. They look at...
But now, we didn't hear where this individual that she's referring to, where do they live? Do they live in Maplewood or a community like Maplewood? Or do they live in Dinkytown over by the university? It totally depends on what community that you're talking about. Because my two sons, they're in their 20s. And they probably would agree that they'd like to live close to their friends. I mean, who, after all, doesn't? I mean, I like to live close to my friends. Mark, I'm sure you like to live close to your friends. We all like to live close to our friends. But if you're in a community such as Maplewood or Roseville or some other suburb, you don't have the bus capacity and the bus routes in order to connect everything up like that. However, if you live in Dinkytown or you live in New York City, you may not want to have a vehicle. So you see, if they're taking this principle and trying to apply it to Maplewood, I don't know that it's going to be a functional translation. And it's what
or logical even, because the fact is, you got to realize that when we're talking about most people, there is no light rail yet in all of St. Paul. It's all in Minneapolis.
Right, and you've got kids in their 20s. Did they want to give up their cars?
They can't. In fact, my son right now is driving over to, he's now working on computers over in Minneapolis, so he has to make a trip over there every day to work on computers because he's got a new job over there. He's also working a part-time job over here so that he can get the time and the experience in so he can be able to set himself up in the future. So he's going after what he can, but with the reality that one job is in Maplewood and the other job is over there in Edina, there's no way he can do it without having a vehicle to drive.
And you bring up a great point, is that if Maplewood doesn't have the employment opportunities for these folks that they think don't use cars, they're not going to have those folks move here, because if they don't have cars, they have to be able to live close to where they work, where their friends are, where their coffee shop is, where the grocery store is. But if their job isn't here, the place where they make their income, they're not going to be able to live without a car. Your son is a great example.
Right.
He needs to drive to where the work is.
But you know, a lot of these mayors, they feel if they build it, they will come. That's like in St. Paul, they're going to build 4 new hotels, and they expect that you as a public are going to get down to St. Paul, even though they got 2 fancy hotels. Of course, they did sell those to the tribe, so maybe they don't count them on the list of white man-held hotels anymore. I don't know, but a hotel to me is a hotel, and my reaction is that you cannot carry that much extra baggage and not expect that the city's going to suffer for it.
You know, and you're bringing up the idea, talking about St. Paul and how, you know, St. Paul is looked at as an urban community because they are.
Right.
And they are the capital city. They have a lot of different neighborhoods and a lot of variety within their neighborhoods. But something has happened with Maplewood, and how the Metropolitan Council is suggesting that Maplewood be looked at, because Maplewood has always been considered a first-ring suburb, you know, and that has always sort of been our status. Well, those officials, the upper administration in Maplewood, has not let the cat out of the bag that the Metropolitan Council is looking at Maplewood perhaps a little bit differently. And now, thanks to Bob Cardinal, that cat has been left out of the bag, because Maplewood had a recent Parks Force Task Force meeting on Wednesday, April 23rd. And Bob Cardinal, one of our city council members, brought up this comment and this question about whether or not is Maplewood a suburb or are they an urban community. And he doesn't sound too happy about the change in designation. Let's listen.
Stuff out here. So what we have from the Met Council, this MSP 140 or whatever, they categorize Maplewood as part of the urban connected to St. Paul. Okay? And I would say that a lot of people from St. Paul would like to Maplewood. But now we're connected to St. Paul, which is, you know, and we're way different than that. But they're kind of putting us in that urban, you know, which don't Maplewood.
So they're not the urban core of the urban, the next class down?
No, it's urban. I mean, I saw that thing. They just came up with it.
Yeah, no, I know, they're like 9.
We're not suburban in the Met Council plan. We're urban, we're the name of St. Paul. And that, you know, that doesn't help us. So, I'm just telling them that.
No, that's good to know, because I was trying to read the 130-page document, but I can't,
We can't change that. I don't see us being able to change that. We're now St. Paul. I mean, that's.
Did you put a comment back into them?
No, I just saw it last Thursday.
Because we have to the end of this month. Now, I just finished a company last night for one of my cities, because I'm a planner. So I'm a city planner.
Okay.
And I just went through one of my cities, and we wrote a letter that the council approved, that we sent to the council because of certain things that our city is getting assigned to, that we didn't incorporate. Just to get that word out there, not that they will necessarily change it.
Yeah, well, just for your information.
No, that's good to know, because they have specific strategies around each area for.
We can see to it, but Little Canada is suburban, and we're urban, St. Paul. And North St. Paul is out of ours. They're not us. So,
No, it's good to know, because there's different strategies that they've identified for, just based on the site, so.
One last thing, the first thing is it's also a resource. We talk about one home that has the ability to.
Good to know. Now, here's Bob Cardinal, a city council member from Maplewood. He says he just saw it last Thursday. That would have been, 6 days before this meeting on the 23rd. Now, it's the consultant who also helps do planning for another community, she says, and informs Bob Cardinal, the city has until the end of April to give a letter in response to that. And yet Bob Cardinal doesn't know anything about it and doesn't realize that the city can be putting in a letter in response. And this lady, the consultant, she said, the city she works for, they put in a letter, and their city council for that city, that they brought it to the council, and the council voted on it. What is the city of Maplewood doing? And think about it again, about our mayor of Maplewood. She lives in South Maplewood. Do you think the residents of South Maplewood who feel that they pay very high taxes are going to appreciate that she wasn't fighting for them and that she allowed it to be determined that Maplewood is urban? Is the people of South Maplewood going to be happy that now they are designated as urban, let alone the rest of the folks of Maplewood? But the point is that you've got a mayor who is just sitting by and letting it happen. She had 14 years in the Minnesota State Legislature, and she is sitting and letting it go by that Maplewood be changed from a classification of suburban to urban. And it probably does have ramifications. Like Bob Cardinal said, it will have ramifications. And you heard the planner lady say that it's a different way of looking at your community. Well, where's the discussion of our council to talk about, is that the direction that they want Maplewood to go?
And what are they really saying about where they feel the direction is for the city itself? Because the fact is, we have a perfect example in Brooklyn Center and Brookdale area up there. They have now just announced in the newspaper, if you read in the last 2 days, that Brooklyn Center is going to be getting a new expansion because there's growth and there's a vitality in Brooklyn Center that's right next to Brookdale, which we talked about how it was failing. And they had to tear down the big old shopping center up there. It was a terrible shopping center. I won't try to defend the shopping center, but the point was that at the same time that I've been trying to get us in Maplewood to look at that We are an inner core city, just like Brooklyn Center, and we have the same
Well,
vitality. Why aren't we getting this type of
Well, and the thing is that
infrastructure growth?
whether, I believe we're a first-ring suburb.
Right.
We are not an urban core center city.
Right.
That's totally different. And so,
And-
is this a secret, an inside secret, that those top administrators in Maplewood already knew all along, and that's why they are promoting these types of housing developments like you have with Sherman Development? You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Somebody knew. Somebody's got the inside secret, and this is the first time it's come out, and here we are in the last inning with 1 week left of giving comment, and nobody can give comment or time.
Well, it always surprised me that I've lived in Maplewood for almost 25 years now, and I have had to keep writing every time Maplewood, Minnesota, but when you have 55109, it's just, always changed to St. Paul. Why is it that...
But they do that, though, with the other suburbs, too, of St. Paul. But now I understand we have another caller on the phone,
Oh.
so let's invite them to the table. Thank you for calling in. Questions or comments?
I have a comment, Diana and Mark. As you know, Nora Slawick was in the legislature of Minnesota for, 14 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe this woman is actually brain dead. She can't do a thing unless somebody is there prodding her, giving her the message of what to say, or telling her what to do. The other thing that concerns me is we have a city manager that should have brought this to the attention of the council immediately.
Absolutely.
Now, why isn't something being done with his authority? This is ridiculous. I mean, either he has to go or he's got to start stepping up to the plate. Thank you.
Right, and see, and this is a very significant issue for any city. It doesn't matter if it's Maplewood or any first-ring suburb. That if the characterization of your community changes, you have to understand as an elected official, how does that impact your future public policy that you may have to make? How does it change the way the Metropolitan Council may look at you? Always in the past, the Metropolitan Council had certain parameters with regard to various suburbs as to how much affordable housing they might need to bear as part of their share of the community need for affordable housing. And there's nothing wrong with that policy, but that's something that they do. But then how does this change of the characterization of saying that Maplewood's an urban community, does that change what those parameters are and as to what amount of affordable housing that they think that we should shoulder? Or does it change the ability of us to be able to set aside green space, for instance? Because as we are currently, we have to have a certain amount of units per acres in order to be able to meet that requirement of the Metropolitan Council. Currently, Maplewood meets that, and as a result of that, that is why we are able to set aside Fish Creek without worrying about the impact it might have on not developing that land into housing. We have that freedom to be able to set aside areas of green space because we have met the requirement of the number of units per net acreage. And will this change? You see, the council now has had none of those discussions. We don't know what impact it will have. And I can see that this issue has generated another phone call.
Well, yes, we should talk to this individual, but...
Yes, caller, thank you for calling in. Your thoughts?
Okay, Diana and Mark, I've got a couple quick questions and comments for you. One, if you change the designation name of the city to suburban from urban, will that affect your ability for new grants through the city because now you're being designated into a larger city instead of a independent city. And the reason I bring that up is I'm from greater Minnesota, and I've applied for rural grants, and they've been denied because statistics are kept by my county. So therefore, I'm looped into the county statistics, even though it's a rural grant for my department, so to speak. So the question is that going to change the availability for grants for the city as well? Thank you.
Good question.
I think he's got a good point there, but the big issue here is more on the, what I'm going to say, the fat cats and the NIMBYs, because doesn't matter if you're rural or a central city or whatever, because the fact is we take a look and over the last 5 years, I can point out again and again and again where like Carrying Hands was supposed to be going out to Virginia, and the NIMBYs out there, the rich people out there didn't want it.
Virginia.
Which is it's an area in the Excelsior area.
Oh, I see. Okay, you mean like a community. I'm thinking Virginia, like the city of Virginia, or the state of Virginia.
It is a city. I think it is. But it's,
you mean Victoria?
Oh, Victoria. It is. Yeah, Victoria.
Okay, I got it.
Sorry, I got the Victoria, and land was given to Sharon and Carrying Hands out there originally, remember? And then there was so much stink by the NIMBYs out there. And you got to realize that was an area where they really didn't have a lot of poor housing out there at the time. So it really met all the requirements. And all they had to do was keep their mouths shut, and they could have satisfied everything. And the lady who's been doing this over in Minneapolis for years, just like the Dorothy Day Center does it over in St. Paul for years, would have been able to do that and have it. And then you wouldn't have had the argument with the same group when the twins were arguing with her about moving her operation for the third time.
And I think that under all of that, I think you're right. Money has a lot to do with it. I do want to take a quick moment to address part of what I know the answer from my perspective of having been the mayor of Maplewood in the past is when the federal government had their money that they were giving to cities as part of trying to get the economy restarted during the bailout time, that Maplewood actually received money because of our population. And so when they were looking at giving money to various communities, it was on a basis of population, and so it was either through the county then who could then funnel the money out, or some communities, cities like Maplewood, they were given a block of money because of their population. So Maplewood did get money, but it was because of their population as a community, and not because of the designation. But it could be that maybe at a state level or a metropolitan level, the Metropolitan Council level, that designation could have an impact on planning. So I don't know that much about it. This is just actually hot news from that meeting where the Citizens Reporter had a citizen there doing the taping because, well, again, the city couldn't figure out how to get a camera there and a microphone to work so that they could record it so that we could all hear the comments. And so we're able to hear the comments because we had volunteers there actually doing the taping, because without us being there, we still probably would never have known about this.
And also, I think one thing I have to point out is that I'm very happy that Bob made the observation and was able to be at least aware enough to catch something like that, because we've been missing a lot of things in Maplewood that we should have been getting. I mentioned the Shutterfly Shutter program that was out there. Now we're talking about the Target one that's going to be up in Brooklyn Center. And all these things. And to be honest with you, that's what we should be going after. We shouldn't be going after another housing complex.
That's right. Now, I understand we have about 10 minutes left of our program. It's going by so fast, but we really enjoy people calling into the program and being part of the discussion. And that really makes the time go by so quickly, but so enjoyably. So now let's take a look at our next clip, because we want to talk a little bit about what is going on with the Maple Woods Parks master planning. Again, we're going into this idea of master planning. To bring you up to date, Maplewood has invested some dollars with a company that did a survey, and from that survey they came up with various ideas on what people are using, what they really are looking for, and the underlying all of this is Maplewood's desire to have a referendum, because they, quite frankly, can't just work within their operational budget. They want to get more money so that that way they don't have to really manage anything, that they can just throw money around. There is a difference between managing your money and just throwing it around whatever, because it's a lot easier just throwing it around than actually managing. So let's take a look at our first clip here. Okay, we're going to get this
this is the first slide. And the first question that we ask is, have you or a member of your household used any parks or preserves over the last 12 months? And as you can see, 26% of people said did not visit parks or preserves. About 30% visited both parks and preserves. About 42% visited parks but not preserves. And a small percentage of people visited preserves but not parks. So generally, if you use preserves, you're using parks. Now, 74%, therefore, 74% visited parks. On a nationwide basis, the average park system, 72% of households visit their parks. So you were right at that benchmark. And considering your margin of error plus or minus 4%, you couldn't really say you're 2% higher, but you're somewhere between 70% and 78% as far as visitation. So you're right at that national average. When you ask people what do you visit the most, by far, it's walking, biking, and hiking trails. By far, it's the things that's visited the most. And that's just and just so we clarify, that's just of the people who said, those 74% of households who said they visit, those 74% of households who said, okay, what do you visit? And so 80-some% of those said that they use trails. So it's really about 70% of your households visit trails. And then after that...
So this is a really pivotal point of this whole survey, because it talks about what is it that people really use the most when it comes to our parks system. And they use it so that they can walk and enjoy the park, nature, the nature preserve, to get out and get some fresh air. And that crosses across age lines. So it's young people, it's older people, it's everyone in between. And it doesn't matter whether you've got kids or you don't have kids. This is something that's applicable to 74% of the people who answered the survey. Now, let's go forward to the next clip, because the next clip is where Bob Cardinal is going to say, well, I don't want to hear about all of this. I just want to talk about the community center.
Councilmember Cardinal. Thank you, Mayor. So, Ron, the mayor and I are picking up on, we're talking about the same thing here. Because of this community center being a draw on the community, you only have so much time. So if you can give us as much as you can about the community.
So just to clarify, a draw on the community, he means a financial drain on the community. Let's continue.
With the, I think we all read through this stuff. We kind of know what's going on here. But if you could really give us as much on the community center, because many of these communities have community center, many of the cities and locations have community centers. And if you can give us some hints, if we can draw that out from you, that'd be helpful.
Well, I can. I would say, though, that I think it's a mistake to not hear about a lot of the other stuff. And the reason I say that, let me explain why. The reason I say that is 19% of your households have memberships at your community center. 19%.
So the reason that I wanted to bring this up is that, you know, we've got this survey, it's got good information in it, and then, you know, the Parks Task Force meets where they're going to talk about how they're going to best put together a master plan. You would think you would want to build then your comments upon the survey. So let's go, though, to our next clip where basically Bob Cardinal has his own agenda. He doesn't really want to be thinking about walking and trails and what people usually do in our park system.
And no one even mentioned soccer field. I would say sobriety is what works, and what could be improved. I was thinking about this meeting, and what I'd like to see would be like, I like concrete, and I'd like to see some kind of concrete circle or concrete slab that could be kind of a focal point for each one of those parts. I know it's expensive, but we do have picnic tables, but like Jason and I are at home, there's really not too much there to feel, and you know, that's been
So instead, let's put big concrete slabs in each of our parks so we have a gathering area. Well, I think it could be that, and then he says, well, but we do have picnic tables. Well, yes, we did hear that people would like to have pavilions where they got a few picnic tables so they can have their family picnics there, and they would like to be able to have those at a reasonable cost or perhaps free. But as this discussion goes on, it starts to sound like that they're actually looking for amphitheaters to be put into the parks so that way, they can have, concerts in the park. Except that you see, we have a community center. It all comes full circle. We've got a community center with an auditorium where we currently have, concerts. So you see, some communities don't have a community center and they have a band shell. Well, other communities, they've got a community center and an auditorium. But keep in mind, and this is something that a lot of people probably don't realize, is that when the community center was first designed and the idea was put together, you know where that band shell was supposed to go? Right where the suburban Ramsey County Courthouse is today. So you see where the band shell was supposed to be, Maplewood decided to give that land for free to Ramsey County for the courthouse instead. So that should be part of the discussion about what Maplewood does when they plan. But I see that we're down, Mark, to the end of our program so soon. And so I want to thank you, Mr. Bradley, for being here this evening.
Thank you for having me again. And remember, we'll be back next Friday. And if you're watching other days, it's probably a pre-recording. So if it's a Tuesday or Thursday, don't try to call in. But if it's Friday again, give us a call.
Excellent. And for our viewers out there, thank you for tuning in. Next week, we'll have more news, more video, and more discussion. Till then, bye-bye.